Greetings to you all fellow travelers. This is Grotnip, welcoming you all back to the logbook of a simple Lindworm traveler. In today's episode we are finally going to be taking a look at the last of the what I would consider to be first wave released high command characters of the northern tribes, and that is the mounted Wrathmane. So who is the mounted Wrathmane? The Wrathmane institution is something that I have covered quite extensively in my videos so far, so I will not rehash the greatest hits here and now. Suffice to say that Wrathmanes are the chieftains of the Orcish tribes and they attain their position through personal combat. Most Wrathmanes that we have seen so far, that is the character Wrathmane Alborg and his unnamed counterpart, have been fighting on foot, but as some of the orcs form tight bonds with the spectral beasts that are the wargs of Lindworm, it's also natural that some of the Wrathmanes will also have the ability to fight mounted, and that is the case with our warg riding unnamed high command for today. Here's the top half of the profile card for the mounted Wrathmane. This was provided to us by Connie back in the day when he spoiled the profile, and I have lifted it directly from the Discord server as to get the maximum possible resolution. As we can see, the mounted Wrathmane comes in at 40 points. And this is quite an odd points cost for our character model. If we consider mounted Wrathmane as a high command, this is not such a high points cost. The other high commands do after all come in at 30, 50 and 60 points, so really not so bad. If we consider him as a unit, then he's quite expensive. He's as expensive as the Orc Revenant or a unit of Orc Battlescarred, and as a cavalry unit he costs 5 points more than a unit of 2 Warg Riders. If we consider him as a character attachment, well, the only unit that he can actually join are the said Warg Riders, so he is a character attachment that's more expensive than the unit he's going to be joining, so that's not quite optimal now, is it? So a high-ish cost, but a weird cost in many ways, and this is something that I feel is something of a theme on the mounted Wrathmane. They are neither here nor there in many cases, but this fluidity of what they are is what I consider to be something that a player needs to make use of in order to get the most out of their mounted Wrathmane. Just like his on foot counterpart, the mounted Wrathmane provides your company with 2 command tokens. While the Wrathmane does have access to a way of spending his own command tokens via his command skill, this isn't the most over-the-top command skill out there, and I have found myself willing to burn the mounted Wrathmanes, or for that matter on foot Wrathmanes command tokens, for more powerful and situationally more important command skills in other places. So the mounted Wrathmane can be an investment into the use of other high impact command skills that you may be packing into your company. 2 isn't quite as much as some of the hegemony characters or even Alborg can bring, but 2 is decent enough, and at 20 points per command token, that's quite a reasonable price when it comes to how much you are usually paying for these things in the Northern Tribes faction. At 3-2 movement and a 14 stride charge plus a large 4 stride diameter base, the mounted Wrathmane is quite speedy a piece. The 3-2 movement corresponds to a 5-4 movement for a regular infantry model, so that's extremely speedy, and effective 18 stride charge range is joint highest in the game at the moment. So positioning the Wrathmane into position should be easy enough, and getting the charge off should be pretty much a fact of life with this model. While the mounted Wrathmane in many respects mirrors his on foot compatriot, there are few smaller and even bigger upgrades that the mounted version gets. The way faster movement is one, and getting to pack an additional wound on the profile is another. Coming in at whopping 6 wounds, the mounted Wrathmane is the highest wound total character in the game released so far, so that's something nice to hang your hat on. Double orange for willpower is pretty much as good as it gets in the Northern Tribes faction, while morale 2 is a bit on the mediocre side when it comes to high cost, high potential characters. You would really love to see a morale stat of 3 here, but for this points cost and this set of tools, morale 2 is something that we have to be content with. The mounted Wrathmane is a high command character, so obviously he's going to be availability 1 per company. As should be pretty self-evident, our Wrathmane over here is a orc character. He's a cavalry model, so keep an eye out for terrain pieces or special abilities that target that in a positive or in a negative way, and he's capable of joining units of Warg riders, which is something that we will be covering at length soon enough. When it comes to other keywords of note, the mounted Wrathmane has raging, which is pretty common a keyword among the more powerful Northern Tribes units. Raging essentially means that when charging, the mounted Wrathmane gets to add an automatic success to his attack roll. He's also elite, which means that the mounted Wrathmane can turn any hollow symbols into solid ones when attacking, defending, rolling for willpower, and so forth. The mounted Wrathmane, also akin to his standard unit compatriots, has access to the preferred terrain rugged ability, which means that slow inducing terrain will not impair the movement of this nimble warrior, nor will it stop him from charging. The Wrathmane is sadly packing no conquest, but that's something to be expected out of a character of this type, so there's really not much more to see here. Next, if we dive straight for the mounted Wrathmane's attack breakdown, we see a profile that's pretty much in line with the on-foot version, and it's quite comparable to the offensive output of a unit of Warg riders. The effective damage output of a mounted Wrathmane is on average 5 points of damage, equivalent with a ceiling value of 6. A double red, yellow, and a success on an elite model is extremely consistent a damage roll, so that's why there is such a small difference between the average and the maximum amount. The push modifier that the mounted Wrathmane has access to only grants him a single additional solid success symbol, so that adds a point to the total of both average and maximum. And if the Wrathmane is able to complete a charge, that gets you another automatic success thanks to raging. By far most of this damage is going to be coming from successes, from push modifier, from the automatic success baked into the profile, and from raging, plus the double red dice. So while the mounted Wrathmane has pretty decent enough a damage output, it's mostly success based damage, which means that extremely high block producing enemies can plant most out of this attack in many instances. The mounted Wrathmane also has a mechanic for dealing automatic wounds. This is a double special switch that triggers the automatic wound infliction, but since the red dice are so poor at providing special symbols, you are highly unlikely to be able to get more than a single automatic wound out of the mounted Wrathmane's attack, and actually on average you may not even be able to get that. Somewhat surprisingly, at least to me, while the offensive output of the mounted Wrathmane is not a benchmark of power when it comes to the faction of the northern tribes. Yes, I know we are spoiled on offensively capable profiles. His defensive capabilities are actually rather amazing. As you can see, the mounted Wrathmane is rolling a huge amount of defensive dice, and they are quite good dice to roll also. He's rolling a green dice and a triple blue dice for damage mitigation, and thanks to Elite, he's even able to cash in hollow shield symbols as blocks when rolling these dice. This gives on average the mounted Wrathmane no less than 3 blocks per defense roll, and he has the amazing ceiling of 5. So enemies looking to take down this mounted commander are going to have their work cut out for them. Not only do they have to chew through 6 wounds, but they have to do so against a model that's rolling extremely proficient a defense roll to try and limit the incoming damage. For further showcase on the power of this defense roll, look no further than my last battle report. Just as is the case with the standard Warcriders, the mounted Wrathmane's base defense roll also incorporates some retaliatory damage, but rolling only a single orange dice doesn't get you very far. It's a 75% chance of inflicting a success upon the attacker, but not only is the enemy probably capable of producing, at least in some cases, a block to get rid of this damage, also single wound only gets you so far. Then again, the mounted Wrathmane does have access to a red dice push modifier on the defense, which puts the average return damage that he's inflicting up to 2 and raises the maximum to 3. This is something that I would consider using when I'm looking to finish off a wounded adversary, or I'm looking to get that last lick in before the mounted Wrathmane goes full on stress. If you are fighting with a point of stress on you and the enemy is attacking, I feel in most instances pretty comfortable pushing for this red dice, even knowing that if and when I lose the combat I will go overboard on stress, since getting to roll 2 orange willpower dice with Elite to try and not flee afterwards is pretty excellent odds of making it. At the same time, against such a high block reducing defense roll, there is the chance that the enemy fails to punch through the mounted Wrathmane's defenses, and any damage inflicted by the Wrathmane will also turn out to inflict stress upon the enemy via them actually losing the combat. The switch ability that the mounted Wrathmane has access to once again closely mirrors that of the Warcriders themselves. It's a double special switch that triggers about 75% of the time, about 80% of the time if you're pushing with that red dice. And it allows the mounted Wrathmane to place a teleport 3 strides to disengage from melee. This is quite potentially devastating an ability, since it can allow the mounted Wrathmane not only to escape the enemy engaging him, but it can actually, due to how positioning maneuvers work, in many cases mean that the mounted Wrathmane gets to bypass the unit attacking him, place himself on the other side of the unit, and if there is still a chance of activating the mounted Wrathmane on the next activation, or maybe at the beginning of the next round if the attack takes place at the end of the round, then he has bypassed the enemy front line, and his speed and offensive output should make him an absolute menace once he gets behind the front line and he can access some of the juicier, weaker enemy units and enablers out there. Last thing to talk about on the solo profile card is the command skill Wrathroar, and this is exactly the same command skill that can be found on the on-foot Wrathmane. Wrathroar has a range of 10 strides, and it causes an enemy unit to receive the frightened and disarmed states. There are a few things of note about this ability, however. Even though it looks very simple at the face value, there are some quite important things missing from the description of this ability that actually give quite a lot of leeway for the Northern Tribes player. Firstly, while the Wrathroar can only be accessed once per activation, it's not once per round. So essentially the mounted Wrathmane can be spamming Wrathroar every time he activates, as long as there are command tokens to spend and enemies to inflict the states on. I'm deliberately staying away from saying enemies to target, since as you can see the Wrathroar does not target the enemy, and that means that you don't need to have line of sight towards the enemy that you are using Wrathroar on. You can freely target enemies that are behind enemy units, or friendly units for that matter, behind buildings, inside forests, whatever, as long as you get within 10 strides of them. As the ability also lacks a timing when it should be used, you are free to use it at any point of your activation. Feel free to roar at something and then move away or charge away. Charge something, roar after completing the charge movement, but before triggering intimidating checks or charge attacks. Roar after you have seen that your attack was able to inflict point of stress, so that your opponent is frightened when they're testing if they're going to break after the combat. Make a move short action skill, shout at something, move in another direction where you need it next. The world is your oyster, essentially. There are some ways of inflicting extra stress that are now these days available to the Northern Tribes force, and being able to cause frightened on a unit that goes 2 or more overboard on stress is extremely powerful and should usually end up breaking the enemy in question. The disarmed state is also something that I have really enjoyed leveraging against my opponents. Getting to remove a single dice that has any successes on them usually quite effectively blunts the worst that an enemy unit can throw at our forces. Getting to remove that red dice that rolled 2 successes can be quite backbreaking on the enemy, and you can also sometimes deny your opponent the use of powerful switch abilities if you are able to take away a dice that includes a success plus a symbol that was crucial for triggering that switch. So go nuts with your Wrath Roar and leverage it to the best of your ability with the high mobility platform that it's been attached to in this case. Before venturing on to the attached unit profile, I thought it might be a good idea to stop and talk a little bit about the elephant, or should I say warg, in the room, or actually in this case the lack of the warg in the room. As you can see from the mounted Wrathmane's profile that we have analyzed so far, there are two very key things that can be found on the Warcriders unit itself that are missing on our mounted Wrathmane over here. First is the passive skill Wargs that allows the Warg Riders to reroll 2 of their attack dice when they are already in melee at the start of their activation. And the second one is the Bloodlust keyword that makes the Warg Riders a little bit unreliable as maneuver tools, but at the same time grants them the power of charge attack rerolls on subsequent rounds of combat if they indeed charge into the fray to begin with. While I am a tad sad to see these rules missing on the mounted Wrathmane, I understand the necessity to keep the profile lean enough to be priceable at 40 points, and at the same time, if we stretch our imagination a bit, we can think that the effectiveness of the Warg mount is baked into the attack roll of the mounted Wrathmane and or into his elite characteristic. While, as we are about to see, it's pretty self-evident from the attached unit profile's abilities that the mounted Wrathmane exerts such a powerful will over his mount that he's able to overcome its natural bloodlust. And that segues us nicely into the mounted Wrathmane's attached profile's basic characteristics. As is pretty obvious, the Wrathmane is an officer type character, and he's only one of the 2 characters that can indeed join a unit of Warcriders, and he's the only one that's officer. The other option that we have released so far being Escort the Executioner, who unfortunately when joining Warcriders or other orc units for that matter is a support piece. As a officer, the mounted Wrathmane becomes the leader of the Warg Riders unit, and those who have played with this unit can testify that playing a unit of 3 large-based models isn't all that easy at all times. But as long as you're able to, for example, get the mounted Wrathmane and one of his friends base-to-base contact with an enemy they're attacking, usually you can leave the last one behind the mounted Wrathmane and all should be fairly okay. The important thing when it comes to the officer status of the Wrathmane is obviously that as he counts as a member of the unit, for numerical purposes, for combat performance purposes, as well as has the ability to detach himself as a solo model once the unit gets wiped out around him. These things mean that the Warcrow riders under the command of the mounted Wrathmane will never fight with their reduced profile, but they will fight with full power until the unit goes down and the mounted Wrathmane continues forward solo. Then again, I wouldn't go as far as to say that units joined by the mounted Wrathmane will never have to use their weaker profile of reduced performance, since I personally, at least as of the release of this video, hold a view that if you are looking to get the most out of your mounted Wrathmane as part of a contingent of Warcrow riders, you will need to keep an open mind and look for opportunities to detach the Wrathmane from his fellow Warcrow riders in order to make the 75 points that you're paying for this combination worth your while. Another important addition that the mounted Wrathmane grants to his unit of Warcrow riders is an extra point of conquest, which brings the unit's total conquest to 2. And as the Warcrow riders are one of those units that suffers reduced conquest when they go down to half strength, the fact that the Wrathmane is an officer is extremely important in the conquest case of the unit's conquest in this way also. As those who have watched my video on the Warcrow riders know, I consider the psychological performance of the Warcrow riders to be the weakest facet of the unit, and both attachable characters, Escort the Executioner, and in today's case the mounted Wrathmane, truly massively help out the Warcrow riders in this regard. The mounted Wrathmane doubles the willpower stat of the Warcrow Rider unit that he joins by providing them with an additional orange dice for willpower, as well as increasing their morale value by 1. You would really love to see that +2 here, so that you could get more mileage out of your powerful Warcrow riders, but as is the case with the solo Wrathmane, morale 2 is what you have to work with. And that's something that's going to limit what you can do with the Warcrow riders going forward, unfortunately. When it comes to the leadership-oriented skills that the mounted Wrathmane brings to the unit of Warcrow riders, he gets to keep the full power Wrathroar, just like his on foot version's attached side does. So everything said about the Wrathroar in this video, or earlier in this video, or in my previous piece about the on foot Wrathmane, also are totally applicable here. The curious thing is that the mounted Wrathmane's attached version packs a passive skill called Leader of the Pack. And what the leader of the pack does is it forces the Warcrow riders to ignore the effects of bloodlust. This is not an ability that can be switched on and switched off as suits the Northern Tribes player, but effectively this ability nulls the bloodlust of the Warcrow riders. I did speak in my video about the unit itself, that having access both to Wargs and Bloodlust is somewhat repetitive. There is only so many rerolls you're going to require to get the job done under most circumstances, but at the same time I am a bit sad to see Bloodlust go when it comes to the mounted Wrathmane's unit. The double orange willpower makes it so that it would be highly unlikely that the Wrathmane lose control of his unit even if this passive wasn't there, but you do lose the access to those charge attack rerolls on the subsequent rounds of combat no matter what. So yes, you do get at the end of the day increased reliability from the unit when you attach the mounted Wrathmane to them, but this does come at the cost of some lost accuracy potential. Then again, as we're about to see, the mounted Wrathmane ups the damage output of the Warcriders in a way that makes this less of a problem, however. Next up, let's look at the offensive boost that the mounted Wrathmane provides his unit. Firstly, there is a baseline addition of a single solid success to every attack roll that the mounted Wrathmane's Warcriders make. He also provides the unit with a push modifier. They are naturally lacking one themselves, so this is pretty nice to see. The mounted Wrathmane's push modifier adds yet another automatic success to the roll, as well as a solid special. The Warcriders, as you probably know by now, have a double special switch trigger that allows them to inflict the vulnerable state upon the enemy, and this push modifier gets them halfway there. Their attack roll also incorporates a yellow dice, so getting at least that one additional special from the yellow dice or one of the triple reds is extremely likely. In addition to these pretty mundane boosts, the mounted Wrathmane also provides his unit with another switch trigger, this time one of a hollow success that allows the unit to inflict automatic wounds. This switch trigger effectively acts as a pseudo elite on the unit, since you are either looking for successes or hollow successes to inflict damage upon your enemy. Yes, hollow specials still do nothing, but on a triple red and a yellow, there is only a single facet of the yellow dice that has a hollow special on it, so no worries there. What worries me a little bit, however, is that even though it's nice that you can never fail to produce at least 1 point of damage's worth of symbols on your red dice, there is no dice that offers you both a success and a hollow success on the same roll, which effectively means that you are getting one or the other but never the both. And this can, in my experience, result in a situation where yes, you are triggering the automatic wound switch once or twice, but that means that you have less successes with which to overcome the enemy's blocks on their defense roll, and you fail to push any additional damage through via your successes. So effectively the same result might have been achievable with standard success symbols instead. But it's a nice switch trigger to have, don't get me wrong, and I most definitely will I will most definitely rather have it than not have it, let's put it that way. Next, let's talk about the defensive improvements provided by the mounted Wrathmane, and I consider there to be 3 different buffs that he brings of various importances. Firstly and most simply, the mounted Wrathmane provides the unit of Warcriders he joins with an automatic block symbol on their defense rolls. This is rather nice because the Warcriders are already a extremely high defense unit with a plenty of wounds, so they're not susceptible to automatic wound infliction, nor are they easy to hurt with traditional success-based damage. And the automatic block symbol makes them even more durable, so that's really lovely to see. The mounted Wrathmane also provides his unit with a red dice push modifier on their defense roll. Remember that the Warcriders are naturally lacking a push modifier on the defense and on the offense for that matter, so getting that from the mounted Wrathmane is pretty nice all in all. It has to be said, however, that I find it to be one of the more difficult decisions under many circumstances whether to push for that defensive extra damage with the Warc Riders, even more so than with other Northern Tribes units, where these types of defensive push modifiers are quite commonplace. And let me explain why. Usually, when a Northern Tribes unit is about to get hit, you know they are about to get hurt, and in many cases hurt quite bad. So you already work with the knowledge that, okay, I am most probably going to lose this combat, unless we are talking about somebody like the Orc Hunters with a attached officer, but hey, they are the love of my life for a reason. But usually you are looking at a situation where you're about to lose the combat anyway, and you get to decide whether to stress for that extra offense mixed into your defense in order to bloody the nose of whatever is coming after your units. So you can basically calculate that, okay, I'm about to take 2 points of stress, what does the world look like after I have done that? If, for example, you are one stress away from being at your morale threshold, yeah, sure, why not? Might as well hit back some in order to get the most mileage out of the stress that you are about to take, and then simply take the difficulty 1 willpower check on the chin afterwards. That, for most of our units, when competently led, should not be a problem after all. If by some miracle you manage not to lose the combat in those cases, well, that's nice, but no worries. Now I will activate something that can cash in the unexpectedly won or drawn combat that my now stressed out unit was part of. But this doesn't all fit with the Warc Riders in my mind, however. The Warc Riders are already rolling quite an excellent, for a Northern Tribes unit, downright amazing a defense roll, improved even further by the presence of the mounted Wrathmane in this instance. And they are already rolling 2 orange dice for offensive retaliatory output on their defense roll. This is a situation where, for the vast majority of enemy units that they are going to be facing, winning a combat against the Wargs is not a given. The possibility or the likelihood of winning a combat against a buffed up, souped up unit of Warc Riders may vary from likely to unlikely, or even exceedingly unlikely, but there is quite a decent chance that the Warc Riders are able to win the combat anyway, or at least draw it, thanks to their excellent block production and the chance of inflicting some wounds with their orange dice. And now, in this situation, if you choose to push for that extra red dice, you are giving up an important part of the activation possibilities that you have for the Warc Riders for the round in question and potentially for rounds to come, because you're taking a point of stress on a morale 2 unit. The red dice does not guarantee that you're going to win the combat. You might roll a single success, and that might not be enough to move the needle if the other dice don't fall your way, or you even might roll that single hollow success and deal no damage with the red dice. Now, if you still lost the combat, you have taken those 2 points of stress on the Warc Riders, and that's not great. Yes, you are probably going to pass the resulting willpower test if it comes down to that, but then in the end, if you would have been able to draw or win the combat without needing to lean on the push modifier, well, now you have essentially taken a point of stress for more or less nothing. Yes, obviously there are going to be cases where the red dice and the double orange will give you something like 3 or 4 successes and you tier your attacker a new one, but that's not going to be the most of the cases now, is it? So balancing when to access this push modifier is going to be quite a narrow road to walk, so good luck on everyone trying to make the right decision on this one. A thing that somewhat alleviates this problem is the third defensive buff that's not shown in any way, communicated in any way in the defensive improvement part of the profile that we see before us, and that's the mounted Wrathmane provided ability to make way more use of the Warcryder's natural defensive switch. As you all probably know by now, the Warcriders have access to a single hollow special switch that allows them to place 3 to disengage. And when I was making the video, the analysis about the Warcriders, I talked about how that's quite a difficult defensive switch to make good use of, because usually when you're getting to trigger the switch, you have already probably activated the Warcriders for the round, and you most definitely have taken a point of stress from one source or another by then, usually due to having just lost a combat in which you triggered the said switch. All this means that a lone unit of Warcriders without anyone to lead them is rather likely to able to trigger the switch, but after bypassing the enemy front line, they will be unable to activate immediately to cash in the rewards. But the mounted Wrathmane helps out in this regard greatly. Firstly, his improved defensive performance means that the likelihood that the Warcriders did not actually lose the combat in which they were attacked, and as a result did not suffer a point of stress, goes up really a lot. So that's the first thing that might enable your Warcriders to effectively teleport past the enemy front line and then engage something important behind. The second possibility is that your new raised morale threshold of 2 left you with enough room to play that you are able to still go ahead and perform the offensive beyond the enemy front line anyway. And the third possibility is that yes, okay, you have now placed beyond the enemy front line, but you are full on stress and you have already activated. What to do now? Well, in that case, you can still detach the mounted Wrathmane from the unit to charge or assault something in the back line. And while the mounted Wrathmane does not hit as hard as a full unit of Warcriders that he's accompanying, obviously, but he hits hard enough that he should be able to take out enemy support elements, commanders and the like, who were not expecting to have to tango with a mounted Wrathmane level combatant where they were positioned in. So the mounted Wrathmane does give you access to a whole host of scenarios, situations rather, where you are able to leverage the place switch of the Warcriders to a deadly effect, while normally you would not have been able to do so. Do bear in mind, however, that you need to be a bit careful when placing the unit if you are indeed intending to detach the mounted Wrathmane from them. And why is this? Is because when you detach the mounted Wrathmane to, for example, charge something, he immediately leaves the unit prior to you declaring your charge. And if you have then backed in encircled your mounted Wrathmane with the rest of the unit, they immediately upon you declaring that you're leaving the unit will start blocking line of sight to your mounted Wrathmane. So you need to figure out when you are placing the unit, okay, how do I need to place my 2 Warcriders so that they don't block line of sight to whatever I'm going to be going after, if you're looking to charge, that is. Obviously, if assaulting is enough for you, then no problem. But then again, with that 3-2 assault move, clearing the big bases of your fellow Warcriders might be a bit of a stretch in many circumstances. So be careful when placing the mounted Wrathmane and the Warcriders in order for you to be able to make the most out of the defensive benefits that he provides. And this leads us nicely to the end analysis. I find the mounted Wrathmane to be somewhat an expensive, a high command option that packs many of the same tools as his on fighting on foot counterpart. Then again, this orcish chieftain is extremely maneuverable and extremely difficult to take out. So if those are the characteristics that you are looking for in your high command, then this orc might just be the guy for you. If we are, for example, playing a pickup game and we know that the feat is going to be decapitation, the mounted Wrathmane is the most difficult to kill option that we have to field in this situation, not only because he's elite and so damn durable with his defense roll and his 6 wounds, but also because he's so extremely quick on his Warc's feet, or should I say paws, and also because he can disarm the enemies that are looking to take him on. So there are many things going in his favor in a situation like this. The main selling point of the mounted Wrathmane for many seems to be his ability to take charge of a unit of Warc Riders, and this can be potentially a powerful combination, since the mounted Wrathmane makes the unit way more versatile and helps address some of their weaknesses, like their weak psychological performance. The unit will also never go down to half strength as long as the mounted Wrathmane is accompanying them, and they do benefit from increased offensive and defensive performance. I still do believe that leveraging that defensive switch to get behind the enemy and then wreak havoc among the softer and less well defended pieces is what I would be going for if I was extensively running this combination, and that's something I'm looking to try out more in the future, as already stated. Then again, the mounted Wrathmane clearly can also be run as a solo piece. I have been running him as a unit of 1, and in that regard he offers many of the same benefits that you gain from taking a unit of Warc Riders, except that he does many of the things better, as well as providing your list with stuff like command tokens, while at the same time eating away a high command slot and not having any conquest as a solo operator. Then again, if you are able to leverage the Evoker's Spirit of Thermopleurus along with Wrath Roar, you can create quite a devastating, a psychological weapon with your Wrathmane. And I'm also interested to test out running the mounted Wrathmane, or the on-foot counterpart for that matter, along with Vergana, because if you can Wrath Roar at something, that means that when Vergana charges in, she can use her skills to apply the vulnerable state against the enemy, at which point you are looking at an enemy that's vulnerable, disarmed and frightened, and that's the combination that provides Vergana with some quite amazing payback for her special abilities. But maybe more on this combination in a future Forces of the Merchant Alliance piece. I think now it's time to put this one in the books finally, and say to you all, thank you for joining me, and safe travels everyone. Goodbye for now.